Son, maybe you should have asked before buying the house, my father whispered in a broken voice, staring at the kitchen floor where he had spent the night sleeping. His hands trembled as he held a cup of cold coffee, and I could see tears running down the face of the man who had always been my greatest inspiration. I had just parked in the driveway of the $380,000 beachfront home I had bought as a wedding anniversary gift for my parents. 50 years together deserved something special. But when I walked through the front door, I found my mother crying on the couch and my father banished from his own bedroom. My name is Miguel, I'm 37 years old, and I'm a neurosurgeon. I spend more time saving lives at the hospital than at home, living basically between operating rooms and overnight shifts. For years, I sent practically my entire salary to my family, bills, emergencies, dreams they could never realize on their own. What the hell is going on here? I asked, seeing boxes scattered around the living room and hearing loud voices coming from the bedrooms. That's when my sister Carolina appeared in the hallway, smiling as if nothing was wrong. Hi Miguel. I'm glad you're here. We were just organizing things here in our new house. Our house? I felt my stomach churn. Behind her came her husband Rodrigo, barefoot, holding a beer and wearing his team's t-shirt. He looked at my father sitting in the kitchen and pointed to the door with a disdain that made me clench my fists. Listen here, old man, Rodrigo said with his typical arrogance. This house is too big for the two of you. We'll take better care of it. You can stay in the smaller room in the back. My mother sobbed louder. Miguel, they arrived yesterday saying that the house belonged to the whole family. That you had bought it for all of us. I looked at Carolina, who avoided my gaze. For 20 years, I was the older brother who solved all the problems. I paid for her college, her car, her apartment, even her children's dental treatment when the health insurance denied coverage. I always believed I was helping my family have a better life. But seeing my father like that, humiliated in the very house I had bought for him to have dignity, I realized that maybe I had created a monster. Carolina, I said in the controlled voice I use in the operating room, I need to talk to you. Now. She laughed, that high-pitched laugh that always got on my nerves. Relax, Miguel. Mom and Dad will love not having to worry about maintenance, bills, those boring things. We'll take care of everything. Rodrigo waved his beer. That's right. Family takes care of family, right, doctor? If you're enjoying this story and want to know how one family can take over another's dream, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to discover twists and turns that will leave you speechless. But while they talked about taking care of the family, I noticed small details that my years of medical school had taught me to observe. Rodrigo's laptop was open on the table with financial spreadsheets. Real estate folders were scattered across the counter. And Carolina's cell phone showed notifications from vacation rental apps. They didn't just want to live in the house. They wanted to profit from it. And that was just the beginning of what I was about to discover. Carolina crossed her arms, assuming the defensive posture I had known since childhood. Miguel, you've always been dramatic. Mom and Dad agreed that this would be best. Isn't that right, Dad? I looked at my father, who avoided my eyes. His hands were still shaking as he held his cup, and I could see the shame written all over his face. During 50 years of marriage, he had worked 3 different jobs to support our family. Now, at 72, he was being treated like an intruder in his own home. They agreed after you showed up here yesterday at dawn with a moving truck and started unloading things, my mother whispered, wiping away her tears. Carolina said you had authorized it, that it was a surprise. I felt my blood run cold. What surprise, Carolina? Rodrigo laughed, that mocking laugh that always irritated me at family dinners. Man, you buy a house for almost $400,000 and don't tell anyone? Obviously, it was for the whole family. We're not idiots. And since you work so hard and never have time to come here, Carolina added with feigned concern, we can take care of everything. Maintenance, cleaning, the responsibilities that Mom and Dad can no longer take on. I walked over to the table where Rodrigo's laptop was. The screen showed a detailed spreadsheet with weekly profit calculations. In the side column, I saw figures ranging from $1,200 to $2,800 per week, depending on the season. Responsibilities, I repeated, pointing to the screen. How to turn the house into a vacation rental business. Rodrigo's face changed completely. He quickly closed the laptop, but it was too late. That's just future planning. In case you decide you want some extra income. Extra income for whom, Rodrigo? Because from what I saw in the spreadsheet, all the revenue goes to an account that ends with the digits 9907. The same account you used to finance that new car in the garage. Carolina snorted. Miguel, you're being paranoid. We're trying to help. That's when my mother spoke, so quietly that I almost didn't hear her. They took pictures of all the rooms yesterday. They said it was to show you how organized we keep everything. My stomach churned. What kind of pictures, Mom? Professional photos, Rodrigo replied proudly. With those tripods and special lights. They turned out amazing. The view from the main balcony will be the highlight of our listing. Our listing. The words echoed in my head like an alarm. For 20 years, I was the brother who solved emergencies. When Carolina was fired from her job at the boutique, I paid 3 months of her rent. When they needed money for the down payment on the apartment, I used my savings. When Rodrigo said he was going to start a consulting firm that would revolutionize the market, I lent him $15,000 that I never saw again. I always thought I was investing in my family's stability. Now I realized I was financing the greed of 2 people who saw my generosity as weakness. Carolina, I said, keeping my voice steady, you and Rodrigo are leaving this house. Today. She laughed, but this time without humor. Or what? Are you going to call the police? This is family property, Miguel. Mom and Dad invited us to stay. Rodrigo approached, puffing out his chest as he always did when he wanted to intimidate someone. Listen here, doctor. You may save lives at the hospital, but you're not in charge here. This house is too big for 2 old people. We're going to put it to good use. Good use, I repeated, observing their confident expressions. They truly believed they had a right to something I had bought with my own sweat. It was then that I noticed more disturbing details. Their suitcases weren't in the guest room, but scattered around the master bedroom. My parents had literally been kicked out of their own bed. On the kitchen counter, I saw brochures from cleaning and pool maintenance companies. Rodrigo had started outsourcing services using the property's name, establishing contracts that my parents would have to honor. The most revolting thing was the ease with which they moved around the house. Carolina had rearranged the decor, moving furniture around as if she owned the place. Rodrigo used the barbecue in the outdoor area as if he had bought it with his own money. You know Miguel, Carolina said. Sitting in the armchair, my father always used to read the newspaper. You work too much. You never have time for your family. It would even be a relief for you to have someone taking care of things here. The manipulation was so obvious that it was comical. But looking at my parents cowering in the kitchen, humiliated in their own home, I couldn't find anything funny about it. Rodrigo opened a beer from the refrigerator, beer that he himself had bought and stocked as if he had lived there for years. Relax, brother-in-law. Family shares everything, right? You have your career, we have our projects. Everyone wins. Projects. As if turning the gift I gave my parents into a source of income was a legitimate family project. But while they talked about sharing and family projects, I noticed details that my years of medical school had taught me to notice. Small inconsistencies that revealed the real plan. And what Carolina and Rodrigo didn't know was that every word, every arrogant action, was being recorded by the security system I had discreetly installed when I bought the house. A system they didn't even know existed. It was when Carolina opened her cell phone in front of me that I realized the true extent of what they were doing. The screen showed a group conversation called Beach House Project, with at least 15 people. Guys, we did it. The house is officially available for rent. First reservation confirmed for next weekend. $250 a night. The messages scrolled quickly. Money emojis, hearts, people asking if they could have a birthday party there. Carolina replied with photos of the bedrooms, the pool, the sea view. Did you post our house in rental groups on WhatsApp? I asked, feeling indignation rising in my chest. Rodrigo laughed, as if I were an idiot for not understanding. Man, we're in the 21st century. Digital marketing is everything. We've already posted on Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok. The pool video already has 300 views. My mother made a strangled sound. They made a video? It looks beautiful, mother-in-law. You and father-in-law appear briefly in the background, giving it a welcoming family charm. I felt my blood boil. They had used my parents as decorative objects in advertising material. Carolina proudly showed the phone screen. Look at the comments, Miguel. What an amazing place. I want a book now. The owners seem like lovely people. We're doing them a favor by giving them visibility. Visibility. As if my parents were a tourist attraction. It was when I saw my father trying to carry a heavy suitcase up the stairs that something broke inside me. His legs were shaking from the effort, and he stopped every 3 steps to catch his breath. Dad, let me carry that. No need, son. It's just up to the little room upstairs. Little room. The attic storage room that barely had adequate ventilation. That's where they had sent my parents. Rodrigo was sprawled on the sofa, beer in hand, watching football on the 75-inch television I had bought along with the house. Father-in-law, later you can take a look at that faucet in the master suite that's dripping. Just so it doesn't bother the guests. Guests. In the house I bought for my parents to have some peace and quiet. Rodrigo, I said, keeping my voice under control, are you asking my father to fix the faucet in the bedroom that was his until yesterday? Oh, relax. The old man likes to feel useful. Besides, who knows more about plumbing than he does? He worked with it his whole life. My father had worked as a plumber for 40 years. Now, at 72, with arthritis in his hands and knee problems, he was being treated like a free handyman in his own home. Carolina approached me with that manipulative expression I had known since childhood. Miguel, you need to understand. Mom and Dad are happy to contribute. They feel like they're part of something bigger. Part of something bigger, I repeated, watching my mother wash dishes for people she didn't even know. That's when Carolina's cell phone rang. She answered it in front of me, without any shame. Hello? Yes, the house is available. How many people? 8? Perfect. We have enough space. You want to have a party? Oh, how nice. Medical school graduation, what a coincidence. She paused, looking at me with a provocative smile. The price is $400 per day for the party. Can you include music until 2 in the morning? Of course you can. The owners are super flexible. Owners. She was talking about my parents as if they were her employees. After hanging up, Carolina crossed her arms. There you go, Miguel. We already have our second booking. A graduation party. Imagine how cool it will be. Mom and Dad will get to meet young doctors like you. Carolina, I said, feeling every muscle in my body tense up, you just rented our parents' house for a college party. Graduation party, she corrected. They're educated people. And look at all the money we'll make. In one weekend, we'll pay almost $1,000 in household bills. Rodrigo stood up from the sofa, puffing out his chest. That's right. Finally, someone in the family has business sense. Your problem, Miguel, is that you think small. A house like this sitting empty is money down the drain. Money down the drain. The house I bought for my parents to enjoy their final years in peace was money down the drain. I looked around the room. In 24 hours, they had turned the most important gift I had ever given them into an unauthorized family business. My parents, who should have been enjoying their retirement in their dream home, were being treated like caretakers. Miguel, my mother whispered, approaching me with red eyes, they said that if we don't cooperate, they'll have to find another place for the business. And then the house would really be empty. The manipulation was so cruel that it was brilliant. They had convinced my parents that collaborating with their own humiliation was a favor to the family. It was then that I noticed a small detail that had gone unnoticed. In the corner of the room, half hidden behind the curtain, was the security camera I had discreetly installed when I bought the house. A camera that Carolina and Rodrigo didn't even know existed. A camera that had recorded every word, every gesture, every moment of cruelty over the last 2 days. While they celebrated their reservations and counted the money they hadn't even received yet, I mentally calculated how many laws they were violating. Unauthorized use of property. Exploitation of the elderly. Commercial operation in a residential area. And that was just the beginning. You know, Carolina, I said, forcing a smile, you're right. It's better to enjoy the house. She blinked, surprised by my change of tone. Really? You understand. I understand perfectly. You want to turn the gift I gave our parents into a source of income. You want to use the house as a business. Rodrigo clapped his hands. Now you're speaking our language. I knew you would understand. Then I'll help you, I continued, keeping my smile. I'll give you all the support you need to make this business work exactly as it deserves to work. What they didn't realize was that I didn't say the business would work well. I said it would work as it deserved to. And from that moment on, with the camera recording every word and my plan beginning to take shape, they would finally have everything they deserved. The question was, were they prepared for the consequences of turning generosity into greed? Over the next 3 days, I became the most cooperative brother Carolina and Rodrigo had ever seen. I smiled when they told me about new reservations. I praised the efficiency with which they had organized the cleaning schedule for my mother. I even offered advice on how to improve the decor for the ad photos. "See, honey," Carolina whispered to Rodrigo while I helped my father assemble a shelf in the back room. "I told you Miguel would understand. He's always been the most sensible one in the family." Sensible. If they knew what was really going through my mind, they wouldn't call me sensible. During those 3 days, I documented their every move. The security camera they had completely ignored continued to record everything in high definition. Conversations about maximizing profit, while my parents washed guests' clothes. Discussions about charging extra for using the barbecue. Even Rodrigo's cruel laughter when my father stumbled carrying suitcases up the stairs. But what struck me most was the evolution of their cruelty. On the first day, they still pretended to show some consideration for our parents. By the third day, they treated them like unpaid employees. "Mrs. Ruth," Rodrigo shouted from the balcony, "there are some leaves in the pool. Can you clean it up before the guests arrive?" My mother, at 69 years old, with arthritis in her hands, spent the entire afternoon fishing leaves out of the pool while Carolina sunbathed beside her. "And can your father fix that hinge on the gate? It's making noise," Carolina added, without even looking up from her magazine. As I watched this systematic humiliation, I used my free time for something much more productive. I started by making discreet calls to some fellow lawyers I had met during medical proceedings. "Daniel, it's Miguel. I need a quick consultation on real estate law." Daniel Rodriguez was one of the most respected lawyers in town, specializing in fraud and crimes against the elderly. I explained the situation in technical terms, without mentioning that it involved my family. "Miguel, what you're describing isn't just unethical. It's criminal. Exploitation of the elderly, unlicensed commercial operation, fraudulent use of property. These are several serious violations. What if I had video evidence?" "With video evidence? It would be a solid case. Arrest, heavy fines, full restitution." "How old are the elderly people involved?" 72 and 69. Even worse for the exploiters. The judicial system has zero tolerance for this type of crime. I hung up with my first genuine smile in days. My second call was to Marcus Chun, a private investigator who had worked on several cases where I had to testify as a doctor. "Marcus, I need a discreet investigation into unauthorized commercial activity." "What kind of activity?" "Unlicensed residential property rental, possible tax evasion, exploitation of the elderly." "Do you have an address?" I gave him the information about the house. Within 2 hours, Marcus sent me a preliminary report that made my blood boil even more. Carolina and Rodrigo hadn't just created illegal advertisements. They had registered a shell company using the house's address. They were evading taxes on the rental income. And worst of all, they had forged a power of attorney supposedly signed by my parents, giving them legal authority over the property. A power of attorney that my father had supposedly signed, but which the handwriting analysis Marcus commissioned proved to be forged. Document forgery. Another charge to add to the growing list. But it still wasn't enough. I wanted their downfall to be complete and irreversible. On Thursday night, while Carolina and Rodrigo went out to inspect other potential properties, that is, to look for more houses to turn into illegal schemes, I sat down with my parents in the kitchen. "Dad, Mom, I need you to be honest with me. Did you sign any documents for Carolina and Rodrigo?" My father shook his head. "They brought some papers, said they were to facilitate home maintenance. But I didn't sign anything. I said I wanted to talk to you first." "And were they angry?" My mother confirmed. Rodrigo yelled that we were stubborn. Carolina said we were complicating things. After that, they started treating us worse. More evidence of coercion and attempted fraud. Dad, I want you to do something for me. Tomorrow, when they bring more papers to sign, tell them you need new glasses to see properly. That you'll only sign after you've been to the eye doctor. But my glasses are fine. I know, Dad. Just trust me. If this story of family exploitation and calculated revenge is touching your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a doctor uses his surgical precision to perform the largest family cancer removal in history. On Friday, while pretending to review some medical reports in the living room, I heard Carolina exploding at my father. For God's sake. They're simple documents. You don't need new glasses to sign your own name. It's just a little blurry, daughter. I want to be sure of what I'm signing. Rodrigo snorted. What a joke. It's a basic power of attorney, old man. To make our lives and yours easier. Power of attorney. They had just confessed on camera that they were trying to obtain power of attorney through coercion. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I made my most important phone call. Victor? It's Miguel, the doctor. I need specialized security services. Victor Morales was a former police officer who now offered security services to doctors who received threats. He was also an expert in evidence collection. What kind of services, doctor? I need additional recording equipment, certified copies of video evidence, and a digital crime expert. Problems with patients. Problems with family. Victor paused. I see. When do you need it? Yesterday. I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning. On Saturday morning, Victor arrived at 6 o'clock, an hour before Carolina and Rodrigo woke up. In 40 minutes, he installed 3 additional cameras, a remote backup system, and taught me how to use an app that would automatically send all recordings to a secure server. Doctor, this system is tamper-proof. Even if they destroy the equipment, the evidence will be protected. What if I need to present this in court? I am certified to authenticate digital evidence. Anything recorded here will be admissible in any court in the country. While Victor worked, I reviewed the dossier Marcus had compiled. Carolina and Rodrigo were no amateurs in the art of exploitation. They had done this before. In 2 years, they had moved apartments 5 times. They always stopped paying rent after 2 months, invented non-existent structural problems, threatened to sue the landlords, and left without paying a cent. The shell company they registered wasn't their first. They had created and dissolved 4 different companies, always owing taxes and suppliers. Rodrigo had labor lawsuits from 3 former employees. Carolina owed $15,000 in credit card debt and had filed for personal bankruptcy the previous year. They weren't just cruel to my parents. They were professional criminals. My certainty that I was doing the right thing solidified when I found the last document in the file, a complaint filed with social services about the exploitation of the elderly. Rodrigo's parents. They had tried to do exactly the same thing to his own parents 2 years earlier. The difference was that a neighbor reported them and the elderly couple was removed from Rodrigo's custody before they lost everything. Now they were trying the same strategy with my parents. At that moment, looking at the evidence scattered on the table, I made an irreversible decision. I wasn't just protecting my parents. I was preventing them from doing this to other families. I picked up the phone and dialed Daniel Rodriguez's number. Daniel, it's Miguel again. I want to hire your services. For the elder abuse case we discussed? Exactly. And Daniel? I don't just want to solve the problem. I want them to face all possible legal consequences. I understand. When can I review the evidence? Monday morning. And bring your best prosecutor. I hung up the phone and looked out the window. Carolina and Rodrigo were on the balcony, celebrating a new reservation for next weekend. They were toasting with champagne they had bought with money they hadn't even earned yet. They didn't know that Monday would be the last day of their lives as free men, and that everything they had built at the expense of my parents' dignity was about to collapse in a way that even their worst nightmares had not predicted. Monday morning arrived with a salty breeze that made the curtains dance around the house. Carolina and Rodrigo woke up late, as usual, and went down to the kitchen where my parents had already prepared breakfast for the guests who would arrive on Tuesday. Good morning, family. Rodrigo shouted, stretching his arms as if he owned the place. What a beautiful day to make money. Carolina checked her cell phone and smiled. Miguel, we have 3 new quote requests. A bachelor party, a yoga retreat, and a group of college students wanting to throw a spring party. A spring party. In the house I bought for my parents to have some peace. That's great, I replied, maintaining the same cooperative tone I had used over the last few days. By the way, I scheduled a meeting for 10 o'clock today with a lawyer friend of mine. He wants to help us get the whole situation with the house sorted out. Carolina's eyes lit up. Really? What kind of regularization? Proper documentation for your business. Contracts, licenses, that kind of thing. To make everything above board. Rodrigo clapped his hands. Now you're thinking like a businessman. Where's the meeting? Right here. He's coming to us. At 9:45, Daniel Rodriguez arrived accompanied by 2 people he introduced as colleagues specializing in real estate law. In fact, they were a public prosecutor and an investigator of crimes against the elderly. Carolina and Rodrigo came running from the balcony when they heard voices in the living room, still wearing their swimsuits and smelling of sunscreen. Miguel. I brought the guys. Rodrigo said, extending his hand to Daniel. Rodrigo Silva, Miguel's future partner in the family business. Partner. The word made me grit my teeth. Daniel shook his hand with a professional smile. Daniel Rodriguez, attorney specializing in real estate fraud. Rodrigo's smile faltered for a split second, but Carolina jumped in to cover it up. Fraud? How funny. We're just trying to avoid legal problems. That's why we asked Miguel to bring in an expert. Perfect, Daniel replied, opening a briefcase. Because I have some questions about the commercial activities you've been developing on this property. That's when the investigator, a woman named Sandra Martinez, introduced herself and took out a digital recorder. With your permission, I would like to record our conversation for documentation purposes. Documentation for what? Carolina asked, her voice slightly higher pitched. For the report I'm preparing on unauthorized use of property for commercial purposes. The mood in the room changed instantly. Rodrigo tried to maintain a relaxed demeanor, but his hands began to sweat visibly. Look, I don't know what Miguel told you, but this is all family business. There's nothing irregular about it. Daniel smiled and placed a document on the table. According to our records, you registered a shell company using this address without the legal owner's permission. Carolina swallowed hard. What shell company? We just organized a few stays. Silva and Associates, registered last Wednesday, the prosecutor interjected, placing a second folder on the table. CNPJ obtained with falsified documentation, including a power of attorney that was supposedly signed by Mr. and Mrs. Samuel and Ruth Oliveira. My father rose from the chair where he had been watching everything in silence. I never signed any power of attorney. Sandra turned on the tape recorder. Mr. Samuel, could you repeat that for the record? I never signed any power of attorney for them. Neither did my wife. Rodrigo's face began to redden. Wait a minute. What's this all about? Miguel, didn't you say you were going to regularize our business? That's exactly what we're doing, I replied, keeping my voice calm. Regularizing. Sandra, can you show them the evidence? Sandra opened a laptop and turned the screen so that Carolina and Rodrigo could see it. It was a video from the security camera, showing Friday's conversation where they tried to force my father to sign the power of attorney. This is an invasion of privacy. Carolina shouted, recognizing her own voice in the video. Actually, Daniel corrected, it's evidence of attempted coercion against the elderly, one of the most serious charges in the penal code. Rodrigo began pacing back and forth, his hands shaking. Miguel, what the hell is this? Did you set a trap for your own family? I documented crimes being committed against my parents in the house I bought for them, I replied, finally letting my cooperative mask slip. And you just incriminated yourself again by using threatening language in front of the prosecutor. That's when Sandra showed the second piece of evidence, complete screenshots of all the WhatsApp conversations where they planned to maximize profits and convince the old folks to cooperate. Carolina tried to grab her phone to delete the messages, but Daniel stopped her. Too late for that, Carolina. We already have certified copies of everything. In addition, the prosecutor added, we have the investigation report on your previous criminal activities. Mr. Rodrigo's parents in Sao Paulo, the 5 apartments where you left without paying rent, the 4 companies dissolved leaving debts. Rodrigo stopped walking and stared at the prosecutor. This is persecution. This is criminal behavior, Sandra corrected. You are repeat offenders in crimes against the elderly. Carolina tried one last gambit, running to my mother with tears in her eyes. Aunt Ruth, you're not going to let them do this to us, are you? We're family. My mother, who had spent a week being humiliated in her own home, looked at Carolina with a firmness I hadn't seen in years. Family doesn't kick their parents out of their own bedroom, she said, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. Family doesn't turn a child's gift into a source of income. That was the moment that broke Carolina completely. She collapsed on the sofa, crying, but not tears of regret. Tears of anger at having been discovered. Rodrigo tried one last escape. All right, we'll leave the house. But you can't prove anything about fake companies or documents. Daniel smiled and placed a folder on the table that made my heart race with satisfaction. Rodrigo Silva, you are being formally charged with document forgery, coercion against the elderly, tax evasion, and operating a business without a license. Carolina Silva, Sandra continued, you are being charged with complicity in all of these crimes, as well as attempted embezzlement. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the waves outside and the ticking of the clock my father had repaired on his first day in the house. Rodrigo looked at me with a hatred that was almost comical. Miguel, did you really do that? Did you call the police on your own family? I protected my family, I replied, looking at my parents, who were finally breathing a sigh of relief. You were never family. You were parasites. Carolina tried to get up from the sofa, but Sandra stopped her. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. That's when I realized Daniel had brought another surprise. 2 uniformed police officers were waiting outside the house. What Carolina and Rodrigo didn't know was that I hadn't just called lawyers. I had orchestrated a complete operation that would involve not only their expulsion from the house, but the complete destruction of any possibility of them doing this again to other families. And that was just the beginning of what they would discover about the consequences of messing with the wrong family. The police officers entered the room with the silent efficiency of those who had dealt with similar cases countless times. Carolina tried to run to the bedroom, probably to destroy evidence they didn't even know was already in our hands, but Sandra intercepted her before she reached the stairs. Carolina Silva, you are under arrest for the crimes of document forgery, coercion against the elderly, tax evasion, and attempted embezzlement. The handcuffs made a metallic click that echoed through the room like the final period in a very long sentence. Rodrigo tried to negotiate until the last second. Listen, Miguel, we're family. We can work this out between ourselves. It doesn't have to come to this. Rodrigo Silva, the second officer continued, you have the right to remain silent. As they were led out of the house, my father rose from his chair with a dignity I hadn't seen in weeks. His hands were no longer shaking. His shoulders were straight. Son, he said, his voice firm and clear, thank you for giving me back my own house. Daniel closed the folders with a professional smile. Miguel, this was one of the best documented cases I've ever seen. With the evidence we've collected, they're looking at a minimum of 5 years in prison. And they'll have to pay full restitution for all damages. Sandra added, in addition, they're being investigated for similar crimes in Sao Paulo. Rodrigo's parents will finally get justice too. After everyone left, the house returned to its original silence. Not the tense silence of the last few days, but the tranquility I had imagined when I bought the place. My mother began to cry, but this time they were tears of relief. Miguel, I thought I had lost my eldest son forever. I thought you had changed, that money had changed you. Mom, I just changed the way I protect you. Before, I gave money thinking it would solve problems. Now I've learned that sometimes protecting means saying no. In the weeks that followed, life in the house took on the rhythm I had always dreamed of for my parents. Dad went back to reading in the backyard without worrying about bothering the guests. Mom planted a herb garden on the balcony without fear of Carolina complaining about the mess. The trial took place 3 months later. Carolina and Rodrigo tried every possible appeal, but the evidence was irrefutable. Daniel had built such a solid case that even the defense attorney suggested a plea bargain. In the end, Carolina was sentenced to 4 years in prison and Rodrigo to 5.5 years, as he was considered the ringleader. They were also ordered to pay $300,000 in moral and material damages, an amount that would be used to create a fund to protect the elderly in our city. 6 months after their arrest, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Carolina, written from prison. "Miguel, I know you will never forgive me, and maybe I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that, for the first time in years, I am thinking about what I did wrong. Not only to you, but to our parents. I turned your generosity into a weapon and used our family as a bargaining chip. The psychologist here helped me understand that I always saw you as a bank because I never learned to value myself for who I am. I don't expect a reply, but I hope that one day you can remember the sister I was before I became who I became." I kept the letter in a drawer without replying. Forgiveness is a process, not an instant decision. A year later, my parents had completely transformed. Dad had lost 15 pounds by walking on the beach every morning. Mom had befriended all the neighbors and organized a weekly book club on the porch. "You know, Miguel," Dad said to me one Sunday afternoon while we were fishing on the pier, "I never properly thanked you." "Dad, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He put his fishing rod in the holder and looked at me. "You didn't just save our house. You saved our dignity. For 50 years, I built a life based on hard work and respect. In 1 week, they almost destroyed it all. You gave us back the right to be respected in our own home." That conversation made me realize something important. Revenge isn't about destroying the other person. It's about restoring balance. Carolina and Rodrigo weren't punished because I hated them, but because their actions had consequences that needed to be faced. Today, 2 years later, the house remains the refuge I always wanted it to be. My parents get visits from their grandchildren. Carolina's daughter, now in the temporary custody of her paternal grandmother, comes to spend her vacations with us. She is a sweet girl who deserved better parents, but who found in my parents the grandparents she always deserved to have. The most important lesson I learned is that unlimited generosity is not love, it is neglect. For years, I thought that helping financially was enough to keep the family together. In fact, I was allowing toxic people to take advantage of my goodwill. Setting boundaries didn't make me less generous. It made me more selective about where to invest my emotional and financial energy. If this story of family manipulation and justice well served touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We have dozens of stories of people who refused to be victims and turned betrayal into triumph. Carolina was released from prison last month. I hear she is living in a halfway house, working in a supermarket, and attending therapy 3 times a week. Rodrigo still has 2 years left on his sentence. I don't feel satisfaction at their suffering, but I feel peace knowing that other families are protected. The fund we created with the restitution money has already helped 17 elderly victims of family exploitation. Last week, while we were having coffee on the porch, my mother asked if I missed the sister Carolina used to be. "I miss the idea of her," I replied. "But not the reality. The person who would exploit our parents was always there, waiting for the right opportunity." Dad nodded in agreement. "Sometimes, son, the greatest gift we can give someone is the consequences of their own actions." Today, when I see my parents reading together on the porch of the house I bought for them to have peace, I know that every second of the confrontation was worth it. The sweetest revenge wasn't seeing Carolina and Rodrigo arrested. It was seeing my parents regain the dignity they almost lost, and realizing that sometimes protecting those we love means having the courage to stand up to those who hurt them. The house is still blue, overlooking the sea, with the sound of the waves lulling peaceful afternoons. Just as it always should have been.